All right, let's do it. And we are recording.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Across the Aisle. I'm Justin Collins. I'm here with my partner in crime, Mr. Chaz Case. We have an interesting show tonight. It's going to sound like it's bouncing around from quite a few different topics, but I think by the end we're going to realize that it all kind of just ties in together into one neat little package, where it's kind of one hand washing the other, washing the next one, what have you. Without further ado, Chaz, the biggest thing going on right now is we have now officially doubled the amount of times we've impeached presidents in our 45 years of existence in this country. And Donald Trump, as he does, he's got to do it the biggest and the best that anyone ever did it. He has now been impeached twice by the House of Representatives.
That's exactly right.
What do you think, man? Do you think this is a good move? Do you think it's a justified move? Do you think it's, where are you at?
Well, I think there's two questions here, right? Is it justified? Which means you have to look at the language of the Constitution. Did he commit something that was of a high crime or misdemeanor, unbefitting of the office? It's something like that is the exact language. You want to look at that, which is unfortunate because the Constitution, I think, sometimes purposely vague because they didn't get it right. They had all these kind of same tensions going on when they were writing the Constitution. And so you get a lot of this language that was compromised and said, okay, we're not going to be specific here. We're going to kind of kick the can down the road and let people, like we're doing today, fight about it, which is frustrating for us. But I'm sure Thomas Jefferson is getting a good laugh in his grave. So first, did he commit something that could be considered a high crime or misdemeanor? I think is the first issue. And then the second issue that we're dealing with is the political one. Is this a good move by the Democrats if their goal is to unite the country? And I'm not sure because I think Donald Trump has been the most divisive president we've ever had. I think you can argue that other presidents have been divisive, but I don't think there's ever been one who's reveled in it. He's like a pig in mud and he sees it and he's like, yeah, give me more of that. Oh, you want me to say that? I'm not going to say it. I'm actually going to say it. That's going to make you even more angry. And he kind of jumps in full force. And we
come right up to the line and I'm just going to leave you there.
Yeah. And so I think that's something that worries me because even afterwards, I mean, now that he's on the teleprompter and he's got some guy over there with like a blow dart behind the camera, telling him if he doesn't say this, they're going to take him out. He seems to be saying a lot of the things that we wished he would have said for the past 4 years. But he still hasn't taken any responsibility. He hasn't said that, maybe my words did kind of agitate or seem like dog whistles to white supremacists and far-right extremists. I also don't want to say that there's no blame to be had on the left for this. I'm sure people are going to pull up the Maxine Waters when she's standing up there and saying that we need to get in their faces. We need to make sure that nobody feels welcome anywhere. Come on. It's frustrating to see some of who's the comedian who's holding up the Trump head full of blood that Kathy Griffin.
Oh, what the hell is her name? Kathy Griffin? Yeah.
Right. I mean, she did apologize, which is good, but like Madonna was saying, I've been thinking about blowing up the White House at the Women's March, and people cheered. I mean, this isn't, the right, I think, is where if you're a white supremacist, if you're a racist, I've got a party for you, right? And the Republicans have not done a great job of denouncing that as forcefully as they should. But the left, there's a big radical left too that thinks that it's okay to burn things down when things aren't going the way that they would like them to go. And I think on both sides, you've got Mayor Lance Bottoms on the left who said that anybody who's burning something down, who's lighting something on fire, who's trying to cause violence on our cops is not celebrating what Martin Luther King Jr. stood for is not celebrating the civil rights. So that was a Democratic mayor who stood up and like really gave it to those violent protesters and rioters. And then on the right, you have some people like Liz Cheney even saying that this is just an absolute disgrace. And anybody who was storming the Capitol has nothing to do with conservative values. And so those are the people that I'm going to be looking for in the future to vote for, is the majority middle.
Yeah.
But what do you think?
Well, I'm now forced to just start off by saying, I don't believe for white supremacists, we've got a party for you. I think conservatives far and wide denounce white supremacy, racists, Klansmen, the whole likes. The thing about white supremacists and Klansmen and things like that is they tend to glom onto things and make it their own. Pepe the Frog was not a racist symbol in the beginning, but then they took it and claimed it as their own. Pepe the Frog.
Right.
Yeah. That was not intended to be a racist anything. It was just kind of the good times frog. But they took that. I mean, even as far back as like the swastika wasn't originally supposed to be a symbol of hatred and death to the Jews and all that stuff. I mean, there's a pattern of this where they often just, like I said, they just take something and just glom onto it. It's like, well, this is ours now. And I mean, not for nothing, it started off, the Democratic Party was the party of the Klan, and it was the party of the racists and the segregationists and the Confederacy, for that matter. So I take a little resent to that remark. We do not have a party for you white supremacists. I'm just going to stamp that right now. We got nothing for you. But on this topic, I want to premise this with just how messed up it is that as a society, we have this innate, almost instinctive ability to take something that we all agree on. We should all agree on. There's just no partisanship to be had. A spade's a spade. This is what it is. And then we take this thing, we draw a line right down the middle of it and say, well, now you got to pick a side. So the Capitol riots, for example, I don't know anyone personally who said, thank God we did that we really got it done. That's exactly what needed to be done. And yet, I'm sorry, when did it become, it was a group of white supremacists that stormed the Capitol and not just a group of Trump supporters or QAnon or whatever? Like what? I've heard it in like the Congress hearings for impeachment. I've seen it all over Facebook. It's white supremacists did this, Nazis, Klansmen, they're the ones who did this. When did that happen? How did we decide that?
There's a lot of documented evidence of people going in there that were wearing like Nazi-like memorabilia, Klansman type stuff, saying things like that. So I think that's where they get it from. But of course, they weren't all Klansmen, Nazis, white supremacists, QAnon supporters, but there were a good deal of them, enough that where we've got the documentation with video of those people being there.
Okay, well, that was lost on me. Maybe I didn't look hard enough for that, but I was unaware that was even a thing. I think it was easily 100,000, maybe 200,000 people, and then out of that, it was probably a couple hundred who made it into the Capitol building and actually started doing that shit. And I'm seeing a pattern of this, especially today. I'm sorry, my dogs are just stupid right now. I'm seeing a pattern of this as of late, where we're taking all 75 million people who voted for Trump and we're lumping them in with the Capitol rioters, the KKK, the Nazis. Don Lemon just did a whole thing on it just yesterday or day before yesterday, where he's like, if you voted for Donald Trump, you are akin to the KKK and the Nazis and the white supremacists and all of that. And it's like, how are you going to say that about 75 million Americans? And then out of the other side of your mouth, you're going to say, but hey, it's time to heal. Let's all just unite and come back together. It's like, you don't get to do that. And we don't have to play by that if that's the way you're going to go. I just don't understand how during the Black Lives Matter riots and protests, I mean, they were widely cheered and accepted and yeah, you're doing it by most people on the left, at least in the mainstream left, in the media, in Congress, and all of that. But I don't recall us saying, "Oh, well, all the Democrats are about that." But now the shoe's on the other foot, and all of a sudden we're saying, "Well, you all should have seen this coming, so you're all complicit in this. This is all your fault." Even though we, for the most part, on the right, have all denounced this. We don't think the storming the Capitol was a good thing, but it didn't accomplish anything. It didn't last very long, even. I mean, there's some funny pictures to be had, the guy with the Viking horns or whatever, and the guy holding Pelosi's stand. But beyond that, I don't think anybody thought that was a good idea. So I don't understand why we get to just be lumped in with this group of nut jobs. And then we're also told, okay, but now it's time to unite with us.
Yeah, all right. So I take your point that the lumping in of all 75 million Americans is frustrating. And I think probably the same way that you feel about how the leftists all agreed with the riots and the burning down, or that at least most of them agreed. I think it's probably the same way the leftists are feeling about some of the dog whistles that we've heard that seem a little racist or in some ways just hateful. Starting from his, they're sending over their criminals, their rapists, their drug dealers. But also, I'm sure some of them are good people. That line that we're calling a ban on all Muslims. Was
that his exact quote?
What's that?
Was that his exact quote?
I'm almost positive that he came out and he said, "We're calling on a ban on all Muslims." And then, of course, his policy didn't match up with that because that's illegal. But his rhetoric tends to, and then you could go to any, town hall from any rural place in the United States and say something about a Muslim, and I can almost guarantee you they would be like, "Nah, we ain't doing nothing to Muslims here." And I don't think they've never read the Quran in their life. They don't know that, the God Allah in the Quran is the exact same monotheistic God of Christianity, which is the same one as Judaism. It's anti.
All the way back to Amun-Ra. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I mean, those three, Judaism is the first, but Christianity and Islam, they both talk about Moses. They both talk about Jesus. Like, they're the same religion. They just have like different sects of that religion. But it's a little bit of that anti-intellectualism. They know about their party, their group. And so I think a lot of people, at least some of them, we could kind of hear what was happening, and we knew that this was going to, other people, what they're hearing is, "Oh, Donald Trump, he's on our side." Whenever there was the pickets or whatever with the white supremacists, like, you couldn't call it anything else. They were out there, Proud Boys or whatever, and Donald Trump said there were good people on both sides, and it was like, that wasn't a time where we needed you to say good people on both sides. There was one side that was not allowed to exist anymore. We can't have this. Our country's got a history.
Of course, but if you take that little snippet and you stretch it about this far, the next line was, "And I'm not talking about the white supremacists. They should be totally condemned." It was the next sentence. But we all got that little snippet, and it's like, well, that's what we get. That's not what was said. I mean, it was what was said, and I quote, but the context following it, the next sentence, that's not what was said.
Okay, that's a fair point. That we could do a much better job of catching the context of everything. And I mean, I guess Donald Trump said we're going to go down there and patriotically, peacefully have our voices heard, right? It was the direct quote from...
That was what he said, yeah. And maybe that was a tactic. I don't know. Maybe that's exactly what he wanted to happen, but he just protected himself by saying peacefully and patriotically. Maybe. Who knows? I don't know the guy personally.
And it's not like it's out of character for Donald Trump to say two things
just
in
fly
the same
off
sentence.
The handle. Yeah.
Yeah, and lie off the handle. So that's a problem, but you're right. Yeah, sometimes the left can take certain things out of context, because I don't know how many times the left says we have to stand up and fight for what we believe in. We say that all the time on the left.
Oh, we had to vote for our lives just a few months ago. But did you see it was Representative Louis Gohmert out of, I think, Louisiana during the impeachment hearing? He stood up and he quoted Nancy Pelosi in saying, I can't believe there isn't upheaval in the streets, and maybe there will be, or something like that. Don't quote me, but it was something like that. He was quoting Nancy Pelosi. Yeah. And to follow that, the media report said, Louis Gohmert is saying there should be uprising in the streets. And it's like, oh, wow. Context. Just before it, he said, and I quote from Speaker Pelosi, but they took that part out and they literally, I saw it probably 5 or 6 times. They just played where he said, I'm surprised there is an uprising in the streets. Maybe there will be. And they said, Louis Gohmert's calling for uprising. He was quoting Nancy. Yeah. Dude, it's mind-boggling. It drives me up a wall.
Could we agree on the fact that both sides probably should stop using this kind of rhetoric towards the other side? That most people, at least the rational left, because we hear about the radical left all the time, but there's a rational left that disagrees with a lot of conservative policies, that really thinks that, historically, there's been white supremacy throughout this country, and there are dog whistles that even if you say it certain ways, we can hear, like, we know what you were talking about, and we have to be careful with some of that stuff. Because
what's always bugged me about, I'm sorry to cut you off, but what bugs me about that phrase, the dog whistles.
Yes.
The only ones who hear the dog whistles are the dogs, right? So why is it the left saying that was a dog whistle? And I'm sitting here like, I didn't hear that shit at all.
Yeah, you would think. So, well, I don't think that you are part of that conservative base. So just a little history context. When you'd mentioned that the Democratic Party was the party of the Klan, and you're exactly right. Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. About the Southern switch, right? The Dixiecrats during the
but I mean, I'm going to let you explain it, but I don't think it's what you think it is. But yeah, go ahead.
All right. Well, so in 1965, we signed the Civil Rights Act, passed by Johnson, right? Lyndon Johnson, after Mr. Kennedy passed away. And so he signs it. And then the next thing he says is that I've just signed off the South to the Republicans for all of my life and all of the next generation's life. And the reason he was saying that was because there was a lot of people who in the South still wanted segregation across the country. And those people are still here. They had kids and they're our age. And those are the people that I think are wishing that we go back to a simpler time. There's something with the Republicans, they idealize the past, while Democrats and the left usually idealize a utopian future. It's a weird thing that either side does, that we got to make America great again. We need to make America great for once, and instead of living in the now, the reality of what America is. How am I wrong about that Southern Dixiecrat switch?
Well, I don't know. Apparently, I'm now talking about a completely different switch, but there was the one I was referring to was the one after the Civil War, when slavery was abolished, and the South, and in that time, the North had just exploded miles ahead of the South as far as economy, as far as jobs, as far as infrastructure, all of it. So there was actually a physical switch where, I believe under Lincoln, he said, okay, people in the North move to the South and get everything set up. People in the South move to the North where the jobs already are. And that's how we'll fix this. Yeah. So who were the Confederacy now lived in the North, and who was the Union now lived in the South. How that played out all the way to the 60s, I don't historically know. So maybe we're both right in this sense.
Yeah, well, one of the other presidents, since we're talking about impeachment, who was impeached was Andrew Johnson. And I don't exactly know what he was impeached for, but I think one of the things, it was during the reunification of the country. So after the South is defeated, they're taken over by the North. So there's no Southern mayors. If you were a part of the South, you were under the boot of the Northerners who came down, the Yankees, and took over the cities. We were the mayors. The Northerners were the mayors, the governors, the sheriffs. But Andrew Johnson pulled back the reins and let them become the mayors and the sheriffs and then we get all the Jim Crow laws, because all those people who wanted to keep slavery start taking positions of power again. You start arresting, because in the 13th Amendment, it says that slavery should be abolished except, and this little comma thing here killed us for another 100 years, except for use of punishment for a crime. So right after that, what did we start doing? We started arresting Black people for doing things like loitering, or you're standing somewhere that I don't want you to stand. And so now I can arrest you, put you in a chain gang, send you back out to the fields. And that's only if you're not already a sharecropper, where I give you a share of the crops, and then just enough so you can eat and go back out and pick some more crops tomorrow, which sounds like a lot like slavery. There was a long struggle towards equality, unfortunately, that we're still in some ways dealing with the aftermath of.
Oh yeah, for sure. All right, well, that was a little sidestep into history.
Sorry about that. Yeah,
but no, it's fine. This is what we do. So to the point I was making about how we take something as a society that we all agree on, we draw a line right down the middle of it. And now we're picking a side.
Yeah.
Me too. It drives me up a wall. So now I've got to sit here and say, well, either I'm complicit in white supremacy, or damn that, and I'm not siding with that at all. Because, I mean, I still sit here and think the Capitol riots were just an abomination, a travesty, an embarrassment for I mean, to be frank.
Yeah.
But now I'm sitting here stuck between a rock and a hard place. Well, it's like, well, what do I do now? If I want to unite, as they say, I basically have to take my licks and say, yeah, I'm complicit with white supremacy, but fuck that. No, I'm not.
All right. So I think, how could we do this? I think it would make the Republicans. I actually just got a text from an old friend of mine, Jason Hostetler. I played baseball with growing up, and he's definitely a Republican, has supported Trump this whole presidency, but he just sent me a video, and the video was of the Maxine Waters. It was of the guy who supported Bernie Sanders, who shot up at the congressional baseball field, and the burning and the riots and the violence against the police officers during some of the Black Lives Matter protests. And he was saying, don't you see the hypocrisy? And I could feel him just being so angry, because he thought the protests that turned into riots at the Capitol were nonsense too. And he was like, but nobody on the left is saying that the other nonsense happened and that was wrong. And so I think if we could get some more people on the left to say, guys, we got it. I'm so glad that you're calling out those Capitol riots, because that's not what we stand for. And to give you a bone as well, all that stuff that we've been doing, the Kathy Griffin, the Maxine Waters, we got to knock that off too. And we need some leaders on the left to stand up and say, that's not okay. And maybe at that point, we could come together, because there's so many of my Republican friends, when they first saw that George Floyd video, they were horrified, just like anybody on the left was horrified. Right.
Who wasn't?
And then we draw the line right down the middle. And if you even want to look at, because when I'm not an expert on all of these, but the hands up, don't shoot, the Michael Brown, whenever I did look into that, it was like, because it doesn't matter if he was a good guy or not. What matters is, did the police overstep their bounds and become the judge, jury, and executioner, which is something we don't want to happen. But everything that I looked at was like, this guy was trying to get himself in a dangerous situation and put a life of an officer in danger, and so we have to look at each case. Yeah, each case by case. I mean, when I look at Trayvon Martin, I think George Zimmerman should be, I can't believe this guy's out. I mean, those are the kind of people that I never want to be on our streets.
Well, he's out because they charged him for murder, first-degree murder, and it's like, okay, so now you have to prove he left the house that day deciding he was going to go kill a Black kid. You would have charged him with manslaughter, he'd be in prison right now.
Which is, that was maybe a terrible job on our not law enforcement, but our lawyers who were charging him. And so you just have to look at each case by case, and let the law play out in a fair, just manner that has due process for everybody. But I can understand the frustrations, but I don't think that it ever should lead to the kind of violence, especially against like police officers who are just doing their job, should not be lumped in with the George Zimmermans of the world who are trying to do vigilante justice by spying on kids with Skittles. It's it's
well,
a
it
frustrating,
would help a
complicated
lot.
situation. And
It would help a lot if we actually looked at these case by case instead of every time something like this happened, before the evidence is out, before anything has even been investigated, we just decide, well, this is just another part of the broad paintbrush that everything is racist. All cops are racist and they're out to kill Black people. And this just proves it. Even though when you look at it one by one, Michael Brown went for the cop's gun while the cop was still in the car. What's the guy's name? Jacob Blake. They just found out, and he just admitted he had a knife in his hand at that moment. He said he went to go put it in the car and not take it out of the car, but okay. But
I'm still not sure that it justifies 7 shots in his back. But we have to look at.
They could have put one in his head, though.
Well, thank you. I think we need some. I mean, it's like, okay, but you're right. But we have to look at that case individually, right? We have to say, all right, was this a case of racism? If it wasn't, was it a case of police overuse of force? If it wasn't, was it, we have to look at each individual thing there. And because even the George Floyd, I mean, it absolutely breaks your heart and it's horrific. 8 minutes, nailed on it. I just don't understand that. But it still doesn't prove that it was a racist kneeling. I mean, he could have just been indifferent.
Right.
So it doesn't mean that it's not racist. It just means that we have to look into this and we can't assume things without the evidence and the facts. And it's easy to do that. And of course, that inflames a lot of people's anger as well across the country. No, Justin Collins, you're frozen up on me.
You can just pick up your thought where you left off.
All right. And we're back. Yeah, so I just think we do have to look at each case by case. We do have to recognize that there has historically been absolutely a white supremacy problem in our country, and that historically people of color in this country have gotten the short end of the stick almost in every aspect. And the problems that has caused absolutely exist today, and how we deal with them is complicated, and I don't have all the answers for it. But it doesn't seem to be helping to be labeling 75 million people as racist and then not calling out when our own side on the left is violent. Being violent, I don't think is helping solve any of these problems. I think it just
clearly it's distracting from it.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
Just one more point here that I could probably get in a lot of trouble for, but Obama's got my back. So defund the police is the stupidest slogan we could have ever came up with to achieve the goals of police reform. So that was really dumb. And I just don't understand who's doing our marketing for us. We really need somebody to work on the marketing.
The squad's who's doing it.
Well,
which is funny because even AOC just came out after the Capitol riots. Is like, you know what? Maybe we need some cops around here. Where are the cops?
Well, no, and here's the problem. A lot of people on the left, when I talk about defunding of the police with them, I agree with them. But what they're meaning is reallocating of funds to other services, or what I would say is that we need to reinvest in the police officers and maybe bring in some more experts in other fields. I don't know why police officers don't have at least bachelor's degrees in sociology or history, or I don't know why we can't have police officers who make $80,000 a year, but they're highly trained and they've got degrees to back up the job that they're involved in.
Well, no offense to cops today, but you got to think about who'd be dumb enough to be a cop right now. It's not going to be the person with a bachelor's degree.
I wouldn't do it. I have so much respect for anybody who's willing to run into that kind of danger. But I know that if I was going to run into that kind of danger, I would want to be as trained as possible for what I'm going to see and in the aftermath that's going to happen. And I don't think we do enough to make sure that those those guys are trained well enough to deal with the emotional, fallback of what happens after they see some of those horrific scenes, and then we send them right back out there and expect them to be perfect.
Without question.
Yeah, it's tough.
Without question. Yeah. So to bring this back to impeachment, now that
so all right,
we tend to do this.
Focus.
Yeah. So I have just based on what I've found as I've just been trying to dig through this and figure out, is impeachment the way to go? Is it justified even? Mm-hmm. I think there's a couple of arguments to say that it is justified. I think some of them have some holes in them, but I think there are some arguments for it. But the one to say that Trump actually committed a crime by inciting violence, you have to look at the legal definition of incite, which is a direct call to action or a call to violence. Directly, not implicit, not read between the lines, it's in there somewhere, not just even passionate speech, because there have been many cases from as far back as I think the 1960s was the first time the Supreme Court weighed in on this, and they were like, I mean, yeah, he had some passionate speech, but he didn't actually say, go do this. Had he said, go do this, then that's incitement. Right. So sake of argument, let's say we go this route and we say, this is now what incitement is. We're going to march down Pennsylvania Avenue to Congress, and we're going to make our voices heard peacefully and patriotically. But still, if we're going to go that route, then we need to impeach half of the Democrats in Congress. Mm-hmm. Like you said, the Maxine Waters, Pelosi, AOC, who just said the southern states aren't actually red, they're actually oppressed and need to be liberated. Let's wait and see how that shakes out. Mm-hmm. Chris Cuomo, he's not a person who can be impeached, but when he says, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be peaceful. Yeah, I don't know, the second sentence of that part of the Constitution, I don't know. And so if we're going to hold that standard, we need to hold that standard. And what drives me nuts from my side, when you bring up, well, you had political officials marching with Black Lives Matter and Antifa. A lot of them got booed out of the crowd, but at least they were doing it anyways. They say, oh, well, that's whataboutism. Well, no, I'm just desperately trying to grasp for a standard that across the board, this is the standard. We all agree on it. This is what we're looking for. But when I do that, well, that's just whataboutism. Well, no.
It's solid ground, right? We're trying to find some solid ground to stand on, so that we can have these rational conversations. And I think it's not unfair to say, all right, listen, I agree with you, the Capitol riots were terrible. Mm-hmm. Here comes the whataboutism, right? What about when these people were doing this? Because we made the point last week, I think, that I think the Black Lives Matter movement, many of which were peaceful, and you could say the same thing about the Capitol riots. There were hundreds of thousands of people there, many of whom were peaceful. Mm-hmm. I think the people at the Capitol riots were spurred on by a false belief that, Trump lost the election and it was stolen by a country and they got to get it back. And even Pence was in on it, and the QAnon people, I think they're absolutely in a fantasy world, a lot of those people, but it doesn't mean that they didn't truly believe it. And I think that the right might be able to say, listen, I am against, police brutality. I know that there has been historical racism in our country, but it's not as widespread and rampant as the media is making it out to be. And the people who are committing these violence have this false belief, this fantasy belief of it being everywhere at all times, and that all these police are all evil. And that spurred them to do some of the heinous acts on the left side. Right. And I think it would be it would be irresponsible not to admit that some of that fantasy belief exists on both far end of the spectrums, outside of rational discourse, which is absolutely lacking.
And I want to be clear. I'm saying it now. Mark it. Donald Trump is absolutely responsible for raising the temperature over the last couple of months. Hands down, no questions asked, 100%. When he first came out and said, we've got all this evidence that this was rigged, a tiny part of me was crossing my fingers being like, dude, have the evidence. Show us. make this happen. If this is true, we need to see this.
Right.
And then after botched trial after botched trial, after thrown out case, after even his own judge nominees that he puts in the Supreme Court says, dude, what do you want us to do with this? And then he takes it all the way to, well, Mike Pence. Mike Pence is the one who can do this. And it's like, no, he can't. No, he can't. That's not true. And so going down the line, yes, he's absolutely responsible for raising the temperature. But that does not an incitement make, in my opinion, or at least by the legal standard of incite.
Yeah, that's not what I would have impeached him for. I thought that was
right. They should have censored him, if anything.
That's what I would have done. I would have censored him so that people in the future knew that we thought the way that he behaved was wrong, that we didn't have any reason because we have to defend free speech too. Even that free speech we don't like. One of the, I don't know, the way Christopher Hitchens defended it made me believe that the 1917 ruling, I think, where we hear the yell fire in a crowded theater, and we arrested people who were protesting World War I and handing out flyers, and I think they were socialists, but they didn't believe we should be getting involved in the World War, and they were arrested because it was like telling people not to go join the draft, not to go join the army, and that was like, they got arrested for treason against the country for just saying their opposition. So I thought that went too far, and I think we have to be very careful to whenever we're stopping any sort of speech, we have to make it here's my solid ground. You're responsible for your own actions. And when your actions cause harm to other people, especially physically, then you're responsible for it. And I don't care if somebody told you to go run into the building and punch somebody in the face. When you go run into the building and punch, you should feel like, you can't say he told me to do it. Like, what? That's crazy.
Right. I agree.
You have to be responsible for yourself. And
absolutely,
each one of those people, they can say, well, Trump, I mean, whatever, man. You've got to be an adult. And what Trump should know, though, is that he is influencing all those people. And we need more of an adult leader who knows that these people will do whatever I tell them to do, or they'll act even in a crazy manner if I keep drumming up these things that are known to be falsehoods.
Yeah, and that's the most infuriating part about it on my side, is that we now all know it's all bullshit. All of the allegations, all of the, I mean, maybe not all of them, maybe a couple hundred votes worth of it could be true, sure. But in the millions of votes, it's bullshit. I'll say it right now.
Yeah.
So he is he's definitely responsible for raising the temperature. Another argument I heard that I thought was interesting is take the incitement out of it and just make it the influential part of it. Not the direct incitement, but his words and his energy and his emotions riled up these people, and they attacked the Congress building. The legislative branch has the absolute right to retaliate against the executive branch in this way. And say, what you did caused potential harm to us, so we are now going to take our action and do this to you. It's not a good look. It's probably not productive, but they absolutely have the right to do that. I mean, each section of what makes the United States government, each wing, they have their own powers to do things like that. So if that's the route we're going, fine, but that's not the route we're going. We're saying this was impeachment, or that this was incitement, and we're impeaching him on incitement. They should have gone with option B, I think. And even beyond that, I think they should have gone with censorship, because I think you would have had just across the board bipartisan support for that. Because I still haven't heard anyone come out and say he did nothing wrong. He's completely innocent in all of this. He's a victim even in all of this. Nobody, not one. But now the left wants to push through, the Democrats want to push through this impeachment, even though, I mean, I'm doing the math. I think the shortest impeachment trial we had was 21 days.
I've been interested in that. What if the Democrats take over the Senate? Can they continue the impeachment of Donald Trump? 3
Well, the
months from
thing is,
now when
the Senate doesn't reconvene until the 19th of January, I believe. But you
and
can't
when
impeach a president who's not in office, because the entire purpose of impeachment is to remove someone from office, to remove an official.
I think you can be found guilty of the impeachment because the impeachment is the accusation of wrongdoing. So he's
Mhm.
already been impeached. And now we
Mhm.
got to figure out whether he's guilty or not. And so the Senate will decide that. And if he is found guilty, he's no longer allowed to run for office. And I think that was the mindset
But
behind
they could do
Democrats.
that through censorship too, though, is the thing.
Can they?
They can do that. Yeah, they could even pass a bill to make sure that happens. But you can't impeach a president who's not in office. That's just the constitutional reality of it. If they're not in office, because even through an impeachment, like you can't be arrested after an impeachment trial. That's a whole separate trial. The
Okay.
entire purpose of impeachment is to remove somebody from office. If he's already out of office, what the hell are we spending all these tax dollars on to have a trial? Because we will have to have a trial. That's due process. The Senate just can't come in January 19th and say, okay, impeached. No, it doesn't work that way.
So once they have the trial, if he is found guilty, they would still get that consequence that he would never be allowed to run again. He doesn't get his $400,000 stipend for the rest of his life.
But again, I think I'm pretty sure that is actual. I mean, it's been debated. I've heard it from a couple of people on the right. It's not constitutional to impeach. Okay. Why can't we go back and impeach Obama for a war in Libya right now? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't work that way.
I wonder if you can start it while they're in office, then you're allowed to finish it.
Well, I don't think there's any precedent for that, but I don't think that's a precedent we want to set either.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think.
What are we trying to accomplish here? What is the goal?
Right.
If the goal is to get him out of office, we got 7 days. Right. He's gone. So if the goal goes beyond that,
76, right? So the next he'll be 80.
He'll be 80. He'll be Joe Biden's age.
Is Joe Biden 80?
I think he's like 79. Something like that. Wow. I think he'll be 82 or 83 after the first term, assuming he lives that long, but that's a topic for another episode.
Yeah, I hope he does. Can't imagine having that job at 80,
But speaking of precedent, what I found interesting about this whole thing was how Pelosi came out and basically threatened Mike Pence and said, if you don't invoke the 25th Amendment, we're going to impeach. First of all, the 25th Amendment can only be executed by the executive branch. Right. But Nancy Pelosi went and tried to pass something declaring, you invoke the 25th Amendment or we will impeach. The precedent to that, though, is what really interests me. What happens in a couple of years, 2 years, a year and a half, when somebody decides, Kamala, you need to invoke the 25th Amendment because Joe Biden's just not with it? Because that's what the 25th Amendment is. It's all about recognizance. Right. It's about your cognitive ability to be the president. So what happens in a couple of years, in 2 years, say, when the Republicans, more than likely take back either the House or the Senate? They're going to take back one of them, just more than likely.
Can you impeach somebody just for not being competent?
No, but the 25th Amendment isn't impeachment. That's an entirely different thing.
Right, but what if Kamala says no, and the Republicans are like, all right, well, then what can they do?
You think Kamala would say no?
I don't know.
Kamala's sitting back like this.
Yeah, it is an interesting play.
But what if they decide they want to impeach Biden for his Hunter Biden for the Ukraine dealings?
There you go.
What if we decide that's
going to happen? I'll guarantee
you know what I mean? It's a precedent.
Win.
It is a precedent, and I don't want to see it. Even if it works out the way I want it to, I don't want to see it happen because it's just you're kicking the shit can down the shit road. And
we've got to figure out a way to come together. If you're an alien coming down here,
that's what everyone's saying.
You've got to think we're just the dumbest species that's ever walked the face of the earth. We've got one planet and we're going to destroy it. We've got, one human species left and we can't seem to just get along, and you would think we all want basically the same things. We want safe neighborhoods. We want to have education for our kids so that they can do the things that make them happy and freedom and blah, blah, blah. And we really screw it up a lot. So it is frustrating to continuously see this happen when
I hate to
we're on the same team.
I hate to reference Rick and Morty in this situation, but there's an episode of Rick and Morty. I don't know if you've watched that show, but Rick and Morty are in space, and Rick's got to like change, I don't know, the spark plug or a battery or something on the spaceship. So he gets in his suit and he floats out, tells Morty stay in because everything that's on Earth exists in space is the idea. So Morty decides he's going to put on his suit and go out too, and a space snake comes out of nowhere, bites Morty on the leg, and takes and like they wind up killing it. And Morty's like, "What are the snakes doing out here in space?" And Rick's like, "I told you, everything exists out here. Everything that exists there exists here." So now they have to go find this planet of snakes to find the anti-venom, or essentially like that.
Yeah.
And Morty's like, "Well, what happens if they decide to come after us or something?" And he goes, "No, I just did all the research. The snake planet is stuck on racism. They're never going to accomplish anything in the next 200-300 years," or something to the tune of that.
But just then, making the kind of joke that,
right. You're not going to accomplish anything, and this is what you're stuck on, is the idea.
Yeah.
But then, long story short, Morty buys a snake at the snake shop or at the pet store, puts it in the spacesuit, flies it back to the planet, and drops it off. Now shows them that life exists outside of Earth, and now the entire snake planet forgets about racism. They unite to help go fight the intergalactic enemy.
I think we might be stupider than that. I think if we saw an alien species, we'd still fight. We'd be like, I don't know, he's a leftist alien.
Yeah, he's gray, he's blue.
I thought this pandemic would have, I just, every time I think something's going to bring us together, we figure out a way to let it separate us. And it's just so frustrating. But all right, so before I was supposed to be done by 10 o'clock. It's 10:02. So we got to hurry up through your idea that we should control Facebook and other private companies and what they're allowed to do with their rules.
Well, that's a little oversimplification.
Did I say that the right way?
No, not at all. I don't think we should control them at all. I think they need to stop controlling us with these arbitrary rules, with these standards that only people on the right seem to be breaking these days.
Right.
I'll give you a list of names, and I'll try to do this quickly. I'll give you a list of names real quick. Louis Farrakhan, Vladimir Putin, the Communist Party of China, who's the fourth? O.J. Simpson, and who's the fifth one? Anyways, what do all these people have in common?
They have
active Twitter accounts.
Right.
They have active Twitter accounts. Oh, the Ayatollah of Iran. That was the next one I was going to say. They all have active Twitter accounts.
Right.
But they haven't said anything against the standards of Twitter, even though Louis Farrakhan, for example, said, "I'm not anti-Semite, I'm anti-termite." Or the Ayatollah saying the Holocaust wasn't real, or any number of things. Pick one.
Yeah.
O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson's on Twitter. Like, come on.
Have you seen some of those too? Hello, Twitter world.
It's gold.
It's your Uncle Joe O.J. here.
It is fried gold. But it seems to be it's only people on the right, or sources on the right, or even the New York Post situation where this was actually a true story, but it's banned because it's deemed it violates the standards. Yeah. So I remember when we did the Publisher vs. Platform episode, you kind of offhandedly, tongue-in-cheek, said something like, "If only they could just create their own social media platform." Well, guess what? Parler tried to do that, and Amazon, Google, and Apple shut them down. Shut them down. They don't exist anymore. So we can't even do that.
Well, they took them off their servers.
Right.
Yeah. And so it does seem like
we're splitting hairs here.
Like these private companies, I played a Call of Duty game. So as we're getting into cartoons and video games, a Call of Duty game a couple of years ago, and I can't remember which one it was, but it had Kevin Spacey in it. So we're talking, before the cancellation.
That was a good few years ago.
but they had governments were hiring private military companies because the companies were more powerful than the government in this futuristic world. And I thought, oh, that's definitely going to happen. Like when we have Tesla or the guy SpaceX with Elon Musk, and he's creating rocket ships, who do you think is going to have the best rocket ships in space with missiles on them? Do you think it's going to be the American government? I mean, we've got a space force now, so maybe. But I bet, next in line is going to be Amazon's Blue Diamond or whatever Amazon space company is called, and the SpaceX. And these private companies are going to be in a really good position to be the most dangerous. Like, you're not going to want to mess with SpaceX because they're sending people to the moon for parties, but they're also going to be able to blow some stuff up, I bet. And I think that's what we're seeing right now is that Amazon's more powerful. Like they do control they control online. And right now online is a big part of our world.
Agreed. And I've seen a lot of things over the last couple of weeks about how, the right's complaining that their First Amendment's being taken away. Well, this is a private company, so it has nothing to do with the First Amendment. This is kind of a long thread, so just hear me out.
Okay.
Who has it been over the last 5, upwards of 10 years who's been threatening to break up those big corporations?
Bernie Sanders.
Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah.
Democrats. It's been Democrats. So through the transitive property, if the Democrats are threatening big tech, and big tech is now taking it out on Republicans, isn't that kind of infringing on our First Amendment rights if it is actually being done by a governmental body?
Ooh, I like the way you're thinking there. So Elizabeth Warren says, I'm going to break up big tech. Big tech says, we got to figure out a way to get Elizabeth Warren on our side. How do we do that? We start banning these Republican people that Elizabeth Warren doesn't like. Therefore, Elizabeth Warren is now on our side and doesn't want to break us up anymore. That would be some smart gamesmanship on Amazon's side.
Telling you. And as I always say, I am not a conspiracy theorist by any means, but this doesn't even seem like a stretch anymore when you're seeing what's happening on Twitter and on Facebook. Now, here's the interesting thing. Amazon said they took Parler off of their servers because there were people meeting up on Parler to organize the Capitol riot attack. First of all, I think there's only like 3 million people on Parler at its like peak.
Okay.
But okay, fair. But it's now just come out that actually most of the organization was done on Facebook. And then if you go back to the Black Lives Matter protests, how many of them do you think were organizing on Parler? So if we're holding standards, and these are the standards, when are we going to shut down Twitter and Facebook under that same standard? We're not going to. This is what drives me nuts about it. It's not about what they're doing. It's about how they justify what they're doing. If they'd come out and just say, look, we hate Republicans, then it's like, okay, then that's that.
Right.
But to sit here and act like you're the guardians of morality, that you're the ones who are stopping the evil, don't be evil.
Yeah.
As what used to be on the terms and conditions. You're patting yourself on the back and you're jerking each other, but that's not what's happening. It is a direct attack on conservatives and Republicans. And I tried so hard for so long to be like, you know what, that seems a little far-fetched. But it is getting harder and harder to say that as a conservative.
Yeah. Well,
and I'm sorry,
Continue.
Go ahead. I can hold this thought.
No, you're okay. Continue.
I had this thought the other day, and I couldn't wait to ask you about it. I got to think about how I phrase this. So we agree it's okay for social media platforms to ban somebody for, say, racial discrimination, right?
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry. Let me rephrase.
Right.
We would be okay taking action against big tech companies if they were discriminating based on race, right? Like they're banning white people from Twitter. not just conservatives. We would have a problem with that, right? That's illegal, right?
I would think so.
Okay. Now, what if they did it based on religion? What if they said Jews can't be on Twitter anymore? We'd have a problem with that, right?
Yeah, I think so. I agree.
Okay. One more. Let's say they go on sexual orientation.
Can't do that. That's not
Right.
going to be good.
So why is it okay to do it based on political view?
All right. So I agree with you. I don't think it's just on political view. I think some people would say that some of that political view bleeds over into the, if it's racist, or if it's, some kind of lie about the Holocaust. I mean, I know, like you said,
that's allowed on Twitter.
By that one. All right. So the companies, I imagine, have a very tough time figuring out how to ban people, right? You either have to have hundreds of thousands of people scanning Twitter at all times, humans, or you have to have algorithms that catch keywords and phrases and just automatically ban them or freeze their account or something. And so they've got a tough job ahead of them. And I think we've made that very tough because we told them that the government's going to step in if we see another one of these like mass shootings streamed on Facebook Live. That kind of stuff can't happen. We got to figure that out. And so while they're figuring that out, we have a president who continuously lies about reality, and it has consequences in the real world. And so they're trying to figure out, well, we don't want to ban all political discourse, but we want to ban the lying part that we can prove this is a lie. I think you're right. There's enough documentation to show that they don't always go after the left who is saying something that might be false, but they definitely go after the right if they're saying something false.
Russiagate, Ukraine information, Trump getting peed on by hookers, all totally cool on Twitter.
Right.
The Washington Post saying this guy found Hunter Biden's laptop in his computer shop and this is what's on it. Disinformation, potential disinformation. We haven't actually debunked it yet, but it could be disinformation, so we're going to ban it. It's not just political speech that's being banned. It is literally political alignment that is being banned on these sites. And that's what's scary.
All right. So I'm with you there. If we're on solid ground still. So what role can the government do? Are we going to say that, I mean, I guess like if I couldn't have a business, right, where I said Republicans weren't allowed in.
I mean, legally you could, but I don't think the market would allow it. Legally, I think you could.
That's what I think a lot of the Democrats are saying is happening. Facebook is a business. Republicans are walking in. Facebook saying, you're not as welcome here if you're going to be spreading that Republican rhetoric around here. And if you do, we're going to kick you out. And so they do. And then Republicans are like, you're not allowed to do that. And they're saying, well, go create a red Facebook and you have all freedom to do that.
And then they take that right off of the servers.
Right. So now go create your own red servers, but it becomes increasingly difficult, right? When you have companies like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, who are all left leaning and they own all of it. I mean, there's this huge monopoly on tech that is smaller and smaller.
I just want Zuckerberg or Dorsey or Bezos to just come out and say, we're not holding these two sides to the same standard. Tough shit. At least then we can just stop the charade of, like I said, just being the moral guardians and we're just trying to do what's right. No, you're not. You're not anymore.
Yeah. I think they probably
and that's what's so frustrating.
I think I can understand the frustration, but I imagine if we got to be flies on the walls in the meetings where Dorsey and Zuckerberg, I imagine they're trying their hardest. I think they probably maybe not even subconsciously. I think they probably lean left, and so a lot of their ideas.
No, definitely, they definitely do.
Definitely lean left. But I bet they're trying really hard with this really difficult situation that they've got, this problem that they have. How do I make sure that this false information doesn't get on Facebook without stifling free speech. And
or without actually deeming it false or doing the research to decide it is actually false. We just don't like it.
well,
But it would be a lot easier.
right? That Hunter
Mhm.
Biden story, like you're saying,
Mhm.
had it been false, but it was allowed to be shared, could it have had even if it was totally a lie, and I don't know that it was, and maybe it wasn't, but if it was a
So
total
far, it
lie,
hasn't been. Mhm.
could it have absolutely changed the result of the election? And so Twitter's got like a month. You've got 30 days and you've got to make this decision, because if you don't make it right now, it's going to change the result of the election. And even like the Hillary Clinton, her being in that child sex ring in Pizzagate or whatever, totally false. It got shared everywhere. And I'm sure there's still people out there who think, Hillary Clinton, for all of her faults, she's not part of a child sex ring. I imagine. I know Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein, who knows, but
Probably not. I'll give you probably not.
right, or at least there's going to be a lot more evidence that needs to be produced. But that had a
Right.
real impact on probably a lot of people who went to the polls. And so they've got to make this tough decision on, should we let it out, even though it could be just totally misinformation? Or should we not let it out and get the hate back, especially when, if they don't let it out, it helps their cause, which is, I think, your point.
But there's a lot of polls that were done of people who voted for Joe Biden that said, had they heard about or had they known about the Hunter Biden story, or if it was dug into and it was deemed to be true, they wouldn't have voted for Joe Biden. So if you're going to sway the election one way or the other, at least let the truth out if you're going to do that.
Yeah, I think that's that's the goal for sure.
And I don't know how many people didn't vote for Hillary because of Pizzagate. I think it was because she called half the country deplorable, and then also the email thing that Comey decided to let out right before the election, thinking that wouldn't be a problem. And I think that is a big reason why big tech and the media buried the Hunter Biden stories, because they weren't trying to make that mistake twice.
Yeah. I think
to sit here,
for sure.
Yeah, but to say that they don't, we obviously sit here and agree. Social media has the potential to impact an election. We've got half the planet on this platform. Clearly, it's able to sway an election. But when you're going out of your way to stifle truth, because as far as we know, everything in that Hunter Biden story is verifiably true as it stands today. Now, there hasn't been a trial. Nobody's, found anybody guilty. But no one's come out and said it wasn't true either. Even Hunter Biden hasn't come out and said, that's not my laptop. So to sit here and pretend like that didn't impact the election at all, I think is just as naive as anything else.
No, absolutely. And it is, I think in the future, we're really going to have to take a look at these things, because, it's a company, right? But the town square isn't a company, because that's an actual meeting place in the real world. And we're at this weird juncture in human history where online is the real world. And that's weird, because it's like, it's not a physical location. It's everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And I think that's a really interesting conversation to be had, and how we use politics to figure out, like, are we going to have an online Bill of Rights that maybe
that'd be interesting.
My own data should not be allowed to be sold by other companies, and I own
tried to do
my
that.
own data. I would love it if Amazon had to pay
is
me.
another one.
What's that?
I said Parler tried to do that, and DuckDuckGo tries to do that. But have you ever even heard of that?
Yeah, not very much. You hear about them, like they've got a billboard somewhere, but
I tried DuckDuckGo, and to be honest, it wasn't as good as Google.
Yeah, I always try Bing, because we're a Microsoft county in Sarasota, so everything is Microsoft. But Bing is terrible. Like, the search results are always nothing what I'm looking for, and Google gets it right every time.
Yeah.
But it's probably because they're spying on me.
No one's knocking their products. Nobody's knocking the product. It's just the arbitrary bullshit that comes with the product. That's what I'm so angry about.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the lying too, when they can look in the camera, this is what makes me so irritated at politics all the time, is when they look in the camera and they say what they know they're supposed to say, and they know they're
Mhm.
lying as they're saying it. And it's like,
Mhm.
why am I even asking you the question if I'm going to get this canned answer that you prepared? I think that's a huge reason why Donald Trump won and why Bernie Sanders got so popular, because we were just so tired of the canned responses that made us feel like children. I just So now we need honest people who are invigorating and tell it like it is, but also are kind, good-hearted leaders. And if you know anybody, let me know.
Yeah, man, that's a tall order.
Yes, it is.
uh,
Because
and
then
then
they have
that
to deal
person
with all
also has
the
to,
BS.
yeah, and then that person also has to want to get into politics, and that's just a
Right.
whole nother hurdle. Because who the hell would want to do that?
It's like being a police officer. Why would you want to put yourself at that kind of risk? Because it doesn't matter what you could have done something when you were 19 years old that will brand you when you're 55, and you're like, it's
Yeah,
tough. Um,
agree.
yeah, so I really like Andrew Yang. We're gonna have to talk about him at some point. I think one of his big ideas was that we would tax Amazon every time that they use your identity or whatever, and we
Mhm.
could raise money like that to maybe give back to companies or not companies but individuals
Right.
another
Maybe.
time. What is
Maybe.
last up on our agenda for today?
Um, I think the last thing, and we've already kind of touched on a little bit, but is this idea that's being floated by Joe Biden and the Democrats that now is the time for this country to unite,
Right.
and heal and come back to the sense of normalcy that we're also vaguely, fondly remember. Um, and I don't think I don't think it's as simple as just saying now's the time.
Can I offer some wisdom to my Democratic colleagues on the left?
Sure.
Here's how this happens. You have to take some responsibility for the reasons that Republicans are upset with you. And some of it's just a little humility that you don't have all of the right answers. And so you might even think, as you're saying it, these guys just don't understand, whatever. But for the good of the country, if you're trying to unify the country, sometimes you have to say, okay, you're right. You know what? We weren't always telling the truth under the Obama times. And you did get us when we said you could keep your doctor. We were playing politics there because we really wanted to give all of these people health care. That was on us, and we're not going to do that kind of stuff anymore. And when people are violent, we're going to call them out because that doesn't honor Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy. Not on January 18th is his 17th, 18th
Coming up. Yeah.
coming up this Monday. So
Mhm.
on Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, maybe we make a stand, a pledge to not support violent protests. That's not at all what he stood for. And so I
Mhm.
think if they do that, they'd get a lot of Republicans who say, at least they're being honest. At least they're saying when it was their fault, it was their fault. And we could bring
Sure.
some people maybe back to the middle.
Well, Chaz, I really appreciate you saying that. I think that's very sensible, and I agree. But there's another side to this coin, though.
Mhm.
What I've noticed as far as the left-right divide goes, the right tends to think that the left is, and there's obviously the extremes on both sides, but I think generally the right believes the left is misguided at best. But the left believes the right is actually evil and that we are trying to do evil and hurt people and kill and all of this.
Yeah.
So I think that's another big part of it. What we're trying to do on this very show is just demonstrate that neither of us are evil. Neither of us want anything horrible to happen to the other or anybody else for that matter. But we have to be able to have these conversations before that wall comes up. It's like, oh, no, evil. Don't have to talk to you. Take it off of Twitter. Don't even need to read it. None of that.
That is a
And
great
especially
point.
when, yeah, and especially when like I said, Don Lemon just came out and he said anyone who voted for Trump is akin to the Klan and the Nazi. This is an objective journalist, mind you, or a self-proclaimed objective journalist.
Yeah.
75 million people who voted for Trump are akin to the Klan.
Yeah.
And you want me to unite with you? Which, and I said this in the little segment I did, it leads me to believe that the idea of unity that the left is talking about is not you do you, I do me, but at least we're all in this together. We're all Americans. The idea is conform or shut the hell up. That's how we unify. And I just don't see that happening. I don't see that working.
No, well, not with that message. You're exactly right. The left needs to be humble. The right needs to continue calling out the white supremacists that are in their party. The left needs to call out the radical, violent mobs that have shown up in our party. And we have to come together in that way. And like you said, we can't call the other side evil. We just can't do it because even if there are some people in their party that are evil and some people in our party that are evil, I would beg to believe that it's not the majority, that many of us are just trying to raise our families in safe communities and make sure that everybody has equal rights and equal access to justice in this country. And so we might have different ways or ideas about how that happens and what the best policies are, but we've got to stop the demonizing of other people because of their political party. It's just, it's causing more harm. If we thought it might have been the way, well, it's not. We've got the evidence now over the past 10, 12 years of it's going to lead us down a path towards civil war. And that's very scary. It's not the path that I want.
Maybe not even a war. Maybe we just decide to be two different countries.
And now then, you're taking over my wife's got a book she's writing called Divided We Stand or something like that. And
I like that.
The outer country goes Democrat. So you get your New Yorks and your Californias, and then this middle section of the country, and there's border walls all the way around it. And what would the world look like?
So we get no access to the ocean. We get
Yeah, you guys are fucked.
Yeah, great. So we now have to rely on them to get our supplies. Wonderful. That ought to work out. Well, I'll start.
It's all right. You guys got cows and a lot of corn. You'll be fine.
There you go. Yeah, and then maybe we could make a game of it. See in the next 100 years, whoever's got the best economy gets to buy the other country, and then we just go back to United.
There you go. She'll hit you up for book ideas. Maybe you can write the sequels. That's interesting.
It'll be Divided We Stand, and the sequel be United We Fall.
Dude, we're gonna forget the podcast. All hands on deck need to be writing some scripts.
Yep. Let's get it.
All right, man. Well, do you want to close us out here?
Yeah, I think we did good. I think we solved a lot of the problems that we needed to solve today. Everybody who's listening, thank you so much. Feel free to find us out. We are now, Across the Aisle is now officially on a multitude of podcast streaming sites. We're on Anchor, we're on Spotify, we're on Google Podcasts, we're on Pocket Cast, which I've never heard of. But we're getting there, man. We're getting our reach out there, and hopefully, if YouTube isn't your bag for listening to podcasts, maybe one of the others are, and give us a listen. Thank you all for listening. I'm Justin Collins.
My name's Chaz Case.
This is Across the Aisle. Thanks for listening.